technical meeting. It's, like I said, it's a special one because we'll be hosting and celebrating one of our past presidents. The agenda is very simple. It's a standard agenda. We'll walk through the event, invite the president-elect who will provide our opening remarks, and then walk through the talk for the day. At the end of that, we will be taking some tributes to the celebrants after the Q&A session, before we now welcome and introduce the honoree of the day to give his remarks. We'll take some announcements, and of course, the hottest topic in town right now is our conference, which will be happening in a couple of days from now as we count down. And that's it. It's a very simple topic. So I'm not going to be the one to keep you away from the individuals you want to talk to and the people you want to see. So again, let me welcome the president-elect and also our current chairperson for the conference planning committee, and also the person who's in charge of the continuing education series, Mrs. Madam Pat Ochobu, Fellow of FNAPE. Over to you, Ma.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special technical business session. I am extremely delighted to be participating in this event in honor of one of our past presidents, one of our fellows, one of the supporters of FNAPE. You're very welcome, everyone. We are honored as an association that we have people in our membership who are so passionate about FNAPE and all what FNAPE stands for, that even on a special day that is their special celebration, they choose to celebrate this with FNAPE. We are grateful for that, sirs. And I want to specially welcome everyone who has logged on to this event today. I see many of our important personalities in this forum. Many of our past presidents, I recognize Dr. Femi Lalude and all my ogas who are on this platform. You're all very welcome. We especially appreciate the time commitments that you have put to this, people who are calling in from different time zones. Your support of FNAPE and your participation in this event is highly appreciated. I would like to talk about the chairman for today's event. He is no other person than Mr. Mavuaye Jim Orife, my Oga. You're very FNAPE, I forgot that. You're welcome, sir. Just a brief intro about Mr. Orife. Mr. Orife was was my boss in NMPC. He had his BSc Hans from University of Ibadan, the premier college of in Nigeria, and he had a series of other courses, some in Oxford and other places between the times when he was actively in service. And of course, he's a member of so many, he's one of the founding members of FNAPE. He's also a member of other associations, other sister associations that we are proud to collaborate with, like SPE, like NMGS, and in everywhere he has been, he has, of course, brought in the dedication that he's known for and the attention to detail that he's very well known for. He's a board member in many places. He served Nigeria meritoriously and retired from NAPIM. He retired from the service of NNPC. He was my boss in NNPC NAPIMS, and he was there from 1998 to 1990. And of course, the impact of the work that he did in NAPIMS in those days, we are still hearing the reverberations even today. He took part in a lot of projects, like the also one of the flagstones was the also condensate project, and of course he participated in a lot of things with the NMPC joint venture partners. I would urge you all to please join me to give a warm FNAPE welcome to Mr. Mavuaye Jim Orife, who is the chairman of today's occasion. Thank you. Back to you,
Right.
Latif.
Oh, thank you very much, Ma. As we wait for our session chair, I think it will be also nice if you could talk about our celebrant who has already logged in, and you can see his video, man, if you don't mind indulging us, Ma, my president-elect. Okay, you're muted, Ma, so I've unmuted you.
Thank you. I will try my hardest to do justice to this topic. Let me just start with a little joke. There was a story told about students who were trying to write a WAEC, and it was Bible studies, and the exam question was write something about Jesus Christ, and the student thought he was being very smart, and he went, "Who am I to talk about my Lord Jesus? I'll rather talk about Peter the Apostle," because that was who he had prepared for. So I am very honored and delighted to talk about Chief Tunde Afolabi. We go off script in a bit here and there, just because I also happen to know him personally. The most important thing that I know about Chief Afolabi is that he's married to my former boss, Mrs. Sheyi Afolabi, who retired as a director of ExxonMobil. Sorry, I just have to give that shout out. Chief Afolabi is the MFR. Let me not forget that. He is the chairman and chief executive officer of Amni International Petroleum Development Company Limited. And that's one of the premier indigenous exploration and production companies. This company has been around for quite a while, and they've been doing a good job so far. Dr. Afolabi, Chief Dr. Afolabi, is an illustrious investor and a businessman. And you can see that from the fact that Amni and every other business that he has been involved with has stood the test of time. They are actively engaged in exploring and developing hydrocarbon all over the world, not just Nigeria. Everywhere that there's an opportunity and the economics are right, you will find Amni there. He has a lot of interest in every area of the economic sector, both power and gas, real estate, and manufacturing. Of course, he sits on the board of several companies across the globe. He got his bachelor's degree in geology from Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania. And guess what? We are all watching CNN now and seeing how important Pennsylvania is to the outcome of the election that's currently going on in the US. So Chief obviously has a good taste, which is why he's center stage here, and his the state where his alma mater is also STEM. Do you want me to continue?
Can you hear me? Hello,
Yes,
Ma.
I can hear you.
Yeah, you can go ahead as we hand over to the chairman.
Okay. So I would summarize so that Chief Mavoye Orife can do very good justice. Remember, I started with saying, who am I to talk about my boss? But I have somebody who is better qualified. So I would welcome everyone, and please join me as I hand over the microphone to Chief Orife. Over to you, sir.
Madam, thank you very much. I am not a chief because I can't be a chief. Now to the program of the day. I must say that I am very happy to have been invited to be the chair of this particular event. Well, I have known Chief Dr. Afolabi for some years, at least for 3 decades. And I didn't know he was so young, really. I thought he had been 70 some years ago. But here that he's 70 today, well, that really is something else. That said, I think I want to look at the program for today's event. Abdul, can you please share the program for me, please?
All right, sir. Noted. I'll share it in a second.
I'm trying to get my own iPad to work, but it's not working. Everything seems to be conspiring with it not to make me function, but it's not going to be so. You know, we checked it before, and then we started, and to log in now was a problem. I said, "Not live, we live today. We'll do it all the same."
All right, sir. The program is on the screen now.
I'm not seeing it yet. What I'm still seeing is the poster. Aha. Yes. Thank you very much. Well, I am very, very pleased, like I said before, and very humbled somehow to have been chosen or to be the chairman of this particular program. When Dr. Lai Fatuna called me, I had to ask him, why did you ask me to come and be chairman? There are plenty of other people who said, well, just do it. So that's where my question ended. Now to Chief Dr. Tunde Afolabi. Well, I don't know really whether I am the one supposed to be introducing Chief Afolabi or somebody else, because I am made prepared for this particular function, because if I was actually going to prepare an introduction for Chief Afolabi, you probably, the time we have allotted for this particular function, will not take it. So I will just go through a very brief introduction. And Chief Afolabi is a geologist. He trained in the US, came back in the late 80s to Nigeria, and then started his own company, which today has grown and matured into Harmony. Chief Afolabi is a past president of FNAPE and also a fellow. Chief Afolabi has so many parts. He's a chief in so many places. He's a chancellor of one or two universities, and he's a big philanthropist in Ibadan. That is all I have been able to gather from reading newspapers, not that I have sat down to prepare a CV or introduction to Chief Afolabi. Chief Afolabi, welcome to becoming a septuagenarian. Welcome to the club, and hope that you will bring all it requires that you've been doing to broaden your field of activities, and show that, well, being young does not mean you cannot be strong. Thank you very much. Now, Abdul, where is this? You took away the screen?
Yes, sir.
Let me get my own screen. Let me get my own screen.
All right.
The thing is not working. So put your own screen on for me if you have it already.
All right. I guess you want the detailed agenda.
Yes.
All right. I can get that for you.
Please.
Can you see that, sir?
Yeah, I can see it. Fine. Beautiful. Now, I've done the introduction of Chief Afolabi. Now, the introduction is that of the next one is that of the special guest speaker. Okay. Dr. Austin Avuru. Is a past president of FNAPE. He's also a fellow of FNAPE. And I think he's also a fellow of NMGS. But Austin Avuru has become a domestic world development industry. I met Austin by virtue of my being in NNPC when he came to resume as a geologist. And during the interview, I saw him as a unique person. Until tomorrow, I tell him whenever I see him, that I'm very proud of him, and that all what we thought about him in those years were not let down. Austin Avuru has done very well. He's written a lot of papers, about the economic development industry, about how the industry will be going. And I'm never not surprised to see that, well, he was definitely chosen to address this issue without anyone having any qualms about how he will perform. Austin also has a very long story. Actually, I've been following his career since when I was retired from NNPC, and he also left NNPC. So I followed him, Allied Energy. I saw him where he was there as the operations manager. After that, he kept writing and kept writing and kept writing and doing whatever he needed to do. And from there, they started this marginal field thing started in 2002 or 2003. And he and his team or group were awarded platform. They came as platform, and they were awarded the various fields. One field rather, just one field like everybody else. One field, 2,000 barrels, 4,000 barrels. See where since today. That is by a dint of his labor, foresight, dedication, and vision. One thing I can also tell you about Austin is that he's a very passionate person. I remember we sent him to Chevron in San Ramon to go and be a member of a Trojan team. Lo and behold, when he got there, because of the way he was showing them, I told him, go and show them. And he showed them, and then made him to head that particular team. When his term of deployment finished, Don Mahura called me and said, I think I like this, your staff, very well. I would like to poach him. I said, Don, if you poach him, you are finished. Because me and you will be at war. So don't ever touch him. So Don Mahura didn't go near him after that. Because that is the type of person and intellect and leadership qualities that Austin has. See how he has grown from a 2,000 or 4,000 barrel oil per day field into so many other things. And while he was still in platform, they formed Seplat, which is another new company in which he's a founding board member. He served so many years in Seplat, maybe about 10 or so years. I retired just this last few months. And true to Austin, he's today launching into a new field of AO Holdings as president or whatever he wants to call himself. You can call yourself king, you can call yourself emperor, you can call yourself anything, Austin. You can take any title you want to take. Austin, AO Holdings belongs to you. And having said that, I think you are going to be in for a very beautiful and technical and economic document today, also in the managerial sense. Austin is all of this rolled into one. I have spoken enough today as introduction, so I will call Austin, who is just about 60 years old, to come and tell us what he wants to do in the next 60 years if he's alive. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Over to you, Mr. Austin Avuru.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Latif, and thank you. When they asked Mr. Rife to introduce me, I thought he would simply say, Austin Avuru is my son, period. Because that's what I am to Mr. Rife. He's my father and mentor in this industry. He brought me up. He says he knew me when I came to resume as a geologist. He actually knew me when I came to resume in his office as a youth corper, as a youth corps geologist. And every other thing follows. All the 12 years I spent in NNPC, I worked for him. And then, of course, Mr. Afolabi himself, Dr. Chief Tunde Afolabi, I've also known for, about 28 years. He was a very close friend of my then boss when I was in Allied, George Osaho. And he used to come to our office. What a lot of people do not know about Chief Afolabi is that he started the advocacy for marginal fields in Nigeria. When he first came in from the US, he went around all the offices in NNPC and DPR trying to convince them. He had the experience in the US where you can fund some of these tiny fields that do only 200 barrels a day. And he thought it could happen here. He went around and around and around. They listened to him. Everybody was interested in what he was saying, but it never really happened. And so he changed style a little bit and upgraded his advocacy and eventually got a block instead of a marginal field. And that's the story of ABNI, that he has grown to be what it is today. So since then, in 1992, when I first met him in Mr. Sanwa's office, we remained very close. In fact, I still do not understand how he didn't get around to hiring me. So that's so you can see it's my pleasure with Mr. Orife as chairman, and then we're honoring Chief Tunde Afolabi, my two bosses. It's really my pleasure. I thought I should just discuss today this topic. I chose this topic so that I can generate some very passionate discussion about where we see our industry going. So I chose the unplanned transition of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. And what I'm going to do is to first of all discuss some transition events that will happen. They're not necessarily under our control. They will happen. And after discussing those events that I think will happen, and then I'll ask ourselves exactly how we're preparing for the outcomes of these events that are going to happen. But if you can put the first page on the screen. So the first one I will talk about is what I call the global energy transition. That is happening. That is the transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Latif, if you please put the first page on the screen. Okay. So let's talk about the global energy transition. And what are we saying? There are companies today, BP, for instance, has given indication that in 30 years, and that's not too long from now, 30 years by 2050, 50% of their CapEx allocation will go into renewables, which means half of what they're spending today as CapEx in their oil and gas business will go into renewables. So that you can then plot, how the reduction over time in their CapEx into oil and gas. You look at a company like ExxonMobil, when they made that huge discovery in Guyana, their investors didn't reward them with any major increase in their share price. In fact, their share price dropped. And the interpretation was that their major investors and shareholders were angry with them that in spite of their advocacy, they're still spending so much money in fossil fuels in Guyana and in East Africa. They would rather see a transition away from fossil fuels. So you can pick them one after the other, and every one of them is saying the same thing. Over the next 30 years, they will plan that transition away from fossil fuels. So the implication is that CapEx spend in oil and gas will reduce over time and be heading into renewables. Today, a number of investors are no longer funding maybe gas projects, but not oil projects. They are withdrawing their funding. And even in gas projects, you will need to submit some very, very elaborate documentation on what your company is doing to reduce carbon footprints before you get that kind of funding. So we're seeing a situation where investor funds into the oil and gas sector are thinning out. And to add to this, what we're also seeing today, when this crisis of this COVID crisis started, and about 30 million barrels of oil was, OPEC and Co had to withdraw 30 million barrels per day from the global supply. What we are now being told is that we are probably already at peak demand, which is to say, if you go back to the pre-COVID-19 global demand, which stood at about 100, 110, 115 million barrels a day, that is probably peak demand. Some people say peak demand is still 10 years away, maybe about 2030. Some say 2035. But when you summarize all of this, it looks like the typical 2 to 3% annual demand rise that we have seen over the past 30 years is getting to a plateau. So whether it is today or it will be in 30 years' time, it means we are approaching peak demand for fossil fuel, for oil and gas. And the incremental demand will then go into renewables to supplement whatever residual demand you have for oil and gas. An indication is that by 2040, you will actually start seeing a gradual decline in demand for oil and gas. So we're going to see or ask ourselves, what are the implications for all of this? If we're seeing an imminent in the demand and eventually a decline, and funding is now moving away from oil and gas, and therefore the multinationals, the big spenders, the big capex spenders in oil and gas, are also moving away from oil and gas towards renewables. There will be a void that will have to be filled at some point. So this is the first, I call this fact sheets, and which is what I said, we're going to discuss 3 key transition happenings that are not necessarily within our control. So what I've described is something that will happen. We are not asking questions about whether or not it will happen. It will happen. That is, the global transition from fossil fuels to renewable. That transition is happening. The implications for demand for fossil fuels, for oil and gas, demand will then plateau earlier than we probably anticipated. That is happening. The further implications of this transition, which means less and less capex allocation into oil and gas, that is also happening and will continue to happen on a larger scale over the next 20 years. And the final implication, as I said, international oil companies, the big spenders, moving away gradually from oil and gas into renewables, that is also now happening and will happen on a larger scale over the next 20 years. Let's look at the second transition issue. So I say a combination of the pressures from this transition I just discussed, the energy transition, and the maturity of our own basin, the Niger Delta Basin, means that the exit doors for the IOCs are now thrown open. What started 10 years ago on a major scale with Shell and its partners, divesting some assets, and indigenous independents picking them up. And then Chevron came in and divested a few. When we look back now, when these things were happening, they look like, little instantaneous happenings. In fact, at that time, we actually thought Shell was doing the indigenous community a favor by just throwing some blocks at them so that they can grow. But when you look back now and look at what I described in the first transition element, you can see that these are all part of a long-term, well-thought-out plan by IOCs. Of course, there's nothing that is happening now that they hadn't planned for 10 years ago. So first, the Niger Delta is now a matured basin. There's very little huge exploration efforts going on. Very little exploration appraisal discoveries that are coming up. In the 3 to 5 years between 1990 and 1995, we discovered about 8 billion barrels of oil in the deep water. Since 1990, between 1995 and now, another 15 years, sorry, another 25 years. I'm not sure we've discovered, maybe we'll push that first window from 1990, actually 1993, really, with the drilling of Bonga and Oyo. So if you take 1993 to 2000, where about 8 billion barrels were discovered and a large number of TCF of gas, and you take 2000 to now, another 20 years, I don't think we've discovered another 2 billion barrels of oil. So what we've seen has been the rush of developments of that 8 or so billion barrels of oil. And when you see again the developments of those fields, unlike the big fields of those days for Kadozi Okri, whose developments were meant to drain those fields over a 30, 40-year period. Most of the big discoveries in deep water, if you go and see the production profile, is no more than a 10-year plateau and then rapid decline. So you'll find out that in the next 5 years, those 8 billion barrels we discovered in deep water over that period of time, without any additional discoveries. Without any additional discoveries, you are going to start seeing a rapid decline in the remaining reserves, even in deep water. Of course, when we migrated to deep water in early 2000s, with the developments of fields like Bonga and Bosi and Co., we then, everybody, the multinationals, kind of moved away from the traditional terrain. So we don't readily remember that before the advent of deep water, the traditional terrain of onshore and swamp delivered the 2.2 million barrels of oil that the country was producing. Today, if you take away the 500,000-600,000 barrels a day from deep water, from what we are producing today, I mean, and that's not counting the OPEC plus reductions, even the pre-COVID figure of 1.9. If you take it away, you see that our traditional terrain is barely producing 1.1 million barrels a day. So if we then start seeing that sharp decline in deep water production, and the multinationals are not doing any extensive exploration work to give us additional discoveries there, we are heading to a point where, unless major capex is put back into our traditional terrain, we'll be struggling as a country to be producing 1.5 million barrels a day when we return to the traditional terrain in the next 5 to 10 years. And this happening at a time when, as I said, when it started with Shell, giving out some blocks, and then Chevron and Co., and we thought those were just instantaneous decisions. We now know that all of those simply signal the beginning of a transition or of a withdrawal of the multinationals from this now mature basin. That transition is going to take up to 10 years, 20 years from when it started. We've done 10 years of it. So the point I'm making is the IOCs, their doors, their exit doors are wide open today. It should not surprise anybody. If any of the key IOCs, as we have always known them in this country, announces any major exit plan or announces any major plan to divest, because for them, a number of things are happening. They're heading towards renewables, which means they're minimizing their footprint around the world. They are cutting capex over the next 20 years, as we said earlier. And if they are cutting capex, where are the places that are going to first of all get rid of? It will be the mature basins, especially mature basins where there are also above ground problems like we have in Nigeria. So this qualifies perfectly once they're doing any kind of rationalization of their footprint globally. Nigeria is a key area that they will handle first. So next key transition message I'm giving here is that all of the things we have discussed put together, whether it is the maturity of the Niger Delta, whether it is the above ground problems, or whether it is the residual problems, because I call it residual problems. They have been producing here for 50, 60 years. Everyone has made so much money at a time when it was low cost, decent prices, and everybody made so much money. It is time now to start thinking about abandonment costs. Some of these fields will cost hundreds of millions of dollars to abandon some of these assets. Some, depending on the footprint, could go into billions of dollars. So if there's no better time for anybody who's been producing for 50 years and who is rationalizing his capex, there's no better time to leave than now. Leave very little reward behind for you and all of the headache that's attendant on a basin that is matured. So that's the second transition message. Again, it's not within our control as a country or as individual Nigerians. It is going to happen, and it is already happening. That's the message I'm bringing here. The third transition issue now borders on our economy itself, the Nigerian economy. I think it was also at a FNAPE event much earlier this year where I had given a paper where I said that the contribution of oil and gas revenues to 2020 budget was likely to be less than 30% when we already started seeing the low prices and high costs. When Mr. Rife was GM of joint venture those days in NNPC, he will remember that unit technical costs, they used to have what they call T1 and T2. T1 essentially OPEX and T2 CAPEX. Both of them combined together when they wrote the MOU of 1991 was pegged at $3.50. That is, if you operated your unit technical cost total, both CAPEX and OPEX per barrel, above $3.50, you were considered to be very expensive. Today, we're struggling to keep our OPEX, just OPEX, to get it to head towards $15. If you do any heavy CAPEX spend, by the time you amortize the CAPEX and add to your OPEX, costs today are easily, from the efficient ones, unit technical cost of about $18 to $20, to the less efficient ones that's anywhere from $30 to $40 per barrel. Now, what are the implications of this? The implications are that once you pay your royalty and take out the costs, there is almost zero revenue left to tax. So unlike before, when tax, the PPT itself, used to constitute probably about 70% of total government take from any asset. Today, royalty is the main government take. PPT can be as close to zero as possible when you're talking about the kind of cost. So it's very simple math you can do. If your cost is $30 and oil price is $40 and royalty is 20%, so effective oil price at $40 is actually $32 after taking out royalty. So if you take out a cost of $30, you only have $2 to tax. So increasingly, with costs getting so high, particularly here in Nigeria, and prices now looking, as we say, is going to stay low for the long term. Again, for some of the reasons we described earlier, you are not going to get very high prices. If CAPEX is the CAPEX spend is going away, but more importantly, you are saying that demand has plateaued. If demand has plateaued, and the supply capacity is there, which means anytime prices go a little bit up, the supply capacity is there, both from shale producers and from everywhere around the world. And once the supply capacity is there and the demand has plateaued, the only thing that is going to moderate it is price, which means price is going to remain low. So in a situation where our costs have ballooned and price is going to remain low, it means that oil and gas revenue as a share of the federal budget is going to get very low. We've seen it in 2019. Go back and look at the 2019 performance. Oil and gas revenue was projected to account for 45% of the total budget revenue. Eventually, it accounted for about 37%. The projection for 2020 is that oil and gas revenue as a percentage of the original budget is going to be about 23%. Again, this is reality. That is a transition reality. It is not within my control. I am stating what is already happening and is going to continue to happen for the reasons that I have given. So if we have these transition elements that I said are going to happen, which I have described, which is why I'm saying these are unplanned transition elements. Because otherwise, here are therefore my posers. What are our plans for these transition elements? So let's take them again one by one. How do we plan to manage the energy transition that I spoke about in the beginning here in our industry? Energy transition for us in Nigeria means, for instance, our transition has to be planned and programmed from oil towards emphasis on gas and then into renewables, so that at a time in future, places with a lot of sunshine, we're not going to go into renewables, every type of renewable, because everybody is going to it, whether it is mill, whether wind or biomass. I think that the solution for our transition into renewables in Nigeria will be a combination of gas, and utilizing the sun, particularly in the north, which is solar. So gas will have to play a large part of the solution here in our country. Because, and I'm going to come into that, the thing about gas and all its multiplier effect. So as we are seeing a decline in demand for oil, that decline is not going to happen rapidly here. Because you can talk about electric cars in Europe and the US and other parts of the advanced world. As usual with everything else, all the non-electric cars, all the petrol cars are first of all going to be dumped on sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia and South America. Which means that before we start talking about electric cars being a major issue in sub-Saharan Africa, it will be 20 years from when it became a standard in Europe. So what that means is that even during that 20-year transition period, somebody is going to be responsible for delivering the oil and gas, refined oil that we will need for our internal consumption at a time when the rest of the world is talking about electric cars. Somebody is also going to be responsible for that transition from a lower demand in oil, eventually over the next 30 years, into a large demand for gas for reasons I'm going to give. And again, as I said, because of abundant sunshine here, particularly in northern Nigeria, solar is going to become a big player. Now, if the banks, the international banks, and usual investors, private equity firms, and as I said, international companies are moving away, how are we going to fund our oil and gas industry in West Africa, for instance? It means we're going to have to look internal. We're going to have to look towards our own banks. Hopefully they'll have enough capacity to do some funding. They won't be able to find those dollars that they lend from other banks and unlend to us. They have to internally have the capacity to lend to us. But even more importantly, I think operators are going to have to change the operating model, even as independents, and start operating like the usual IOCs. And I mean, IOCs do not borrow to drill wells. They do not borrow for normal production of oil and gas. Maybe major expansion projects they borrow, or major acquisitions they borrow. But for us as independents, we borrow to acquire the assets. We borrow to get working capital. Then we start paying all the debt. And if we're thinking of any expansion whatsoever, we're going to borrow. Because that kind of funding is not going to be available, we're going to have to start thinking internal, which means we must operate in such a way that our operating cash flow from our normal business should be able to fund the bulk of our expansion and even acquisitions. So our industry will also have to turn its focus to domestic energy security. So for 60 years, oil and gas have just been commodities for export to earn us revenue for the budget, which is why oil and gas accounted for almost 80% of our budget revenue in those heydays. Today, the emphasis is going forward, the emphasis is going to be on domestic energy security, which means we should have the internal capacity to produce the crude oil, refine it for our use within the region. Every time I talk domestic, I'm actually referring to any region, whether it is Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, or West Africa, which is our own region. So we have to be able to internally produce our requirements for fuel, for gasoline, that is refining capacity to meet our requirements in the West African sub-region. We have to be able to produce and distribute the gas across the entire West Africa that generates the 30 or so gigawatts of electricity that West Africa needs to kickstart its real industrial growth. That has to be produced by us internally. because at that point, we're not going to be looking for people who will do it for us. So domestic energy security is going to become the focus, because just producing crude oil and natural gas for export to earn revenues to fund our budget, that is gone with all the transition issues we discussed earlier. So my question is, what are the policies to drive this transition then? What are the policies that ensure that in the next 20 years, domestic energy security is taken for granted by operators that are indigenous operators here, that have the capacity to operate efficiently and deliver results, not just operating to earn some money and make some people rich? What are the policies to ensure that the gradual drift into solar is not done in such a way that when the time comes, you'll be asking to pay subsidies so that solar can succeed? What are the policies to make sure that the solar industry takes off on a purely commercial basis, that you can produce and generate and distribute electricity from solar on a commercial basis? That's the only thing that will make it sustainable. What are the policies to ensure that gas delivers everything, both as source for heavy industries, source for fertilizer for agriculture, source for electricity, to make sure that all of that domestic energy security and food security that we require in our sub-region, that they happen as this transition is happening? What are the policies to drive that? Then my second pose is, as the IOCs retreat, where are the independents that are moving in? Where are they? And this is, I pray that some key people in NNPC and DPR are on this webinar, because NNPC historically has been comfortable. They've had a very comfortable partnership with IOCs. They didn't have to give themselves too much headache. In fact, until 1991, there was even no law that actually guided the operations of the IOC. It was just a partnership agreement between them and NNPC. But that's how well it worked. Both parties trusted each other. NNPC and the federal government trusted the IOCs to produce as efficiently as possible, to pay their taxes and royalties. In fact, in the beginning, the IOCs were the ones who were marketing NNPC's share of the crude that they produced. That's how much trust there was between the two of them. So very little headache for NNPC. If these IOCs that have worked with you for 60 years without headache, as it were, are now leaving, and they have to be replaced by independents. Which independents? Which independents today are NNPC comfortable working with? NNPC is complaining very loudly that they don't like the way we operate, that we are not efficient. They even dare to say, probably even say we're not competent. They say they can't hand over operatorship to us. Operatorship must stay with NPDC because we're not efficient. So how, where are we going? So if these IOCs move out, are we still going to be, and I'm talking about NNPC and government, are we still going to be operating in this dreamland that the independents can't do it, let's stop them? So who will do it? Unless we're saying we'll hand over the entire industry to NNPC to operate. Otherwise, this is the time for NNPC to realize that they have a big job of helping to nurture the independence that will have the quality and capacity to operate the way the IOCs were operating. There are independents all over the world, whether it is Marathon, whether it is Perenco, there are independents that operate more efficiently than IOCs. But it requires nurturing, it requires the right policy, it requires the right partnerships. If we keep living in denial the way we are now, a lot of these guys who bought assets and the complaints by NNPC are genuine. But if we just sit back and between our nails over how incompetent we are as independents, we're only living in denial. Because when these guys go, you'll be left with only NNPC and independents to provide the solutions that I've been describing. So my question is, when the IOCs retreat, where are the independents that will move in? What policy imperatives are required to nurture a crop of competent independents to fill this void? The existing independents themselves, what are we doing to build capacity that will make us take advantage of these opportunities? Yes, we've all rushed into this business. We've all acquired assets. Are we looking inwards and asking ourselves, is a $30 unit technical cost sustainable in a period of low prices and dwindling demand? Do we have the governance structure in our businesses to ensure that we'll be here in the next 20 years doing business? We saw it. We saw a rush of banks, the 126 banks in this economy. Thanks to very strong regulation by CBN, they're down to what, 22 or 24? We don't remember the number of banks that died along the way over a 20-year period. That is usually true of every industry. It's going to happen here. There are certain practices, there are certain structures, there are certain governance structures or the lack of them that are simply not sustainable. If those structures, governance structures, competencies, proper planning and execution, if they're not there, we'll all make money in the short term. Trust me, we won't be here in the long term. And unfortunately, the long term is when we're looking for those who will fill the void that I'm describing. So it's as much work upon ourselves as independents to sit back and build the capacities that will be required, as it is on NMPC to think back, sit back and say, listen, this is a national problem on our laps. How are we going to come up with a solution that ensures that we groom the people that will fill this gap? Where is the next crop of life, Fatona, Tunde that we're honoring today, or is Demola Adeyemi better first EMP? And by the way, congratulations. I understand the Anyala field came on production about 2 weeks ago. That's been there for 30 years without anybody bringing it on production. But where are we going to see those crop of professionals? Remember that we're also lucky in this industry that in the past 50 years, before 2010, Shell and Chevron and ExxonMobil and so on were busy building these lies and Tundes and Demolas and the rest of them. Part of their operating, the fact that they operated this industry for 50 years also enabled them to groom Nigerians that are now filling in these gaps. The kind of grooming that Nigerians receive from Shell and Total and all of that, they're not receiving them anymore. Every one of them is cutting down on staff, trimming staff, preparing for the final exit. So it's only in the next 20 years we're going to fill this void, that is the lack of training. Even Schlumberger, the kind of training we used to receive from Schlumberger and just log interpretation, you don't find it anymore. So where are we going to find these lies and Tundes and Demolas? They won't drop from the sky. Hopefully, maybe if we're lucky, just like our football team, when we ran out of the capacity to develop footballers here, we started relying on those who ran away to play in Europe to come back and play for our national team. Maybe that will happen. Those who are now being groomed in foreign lands will come back and take advantage. But clearly, there is a void to be filled and there is a job to be done, both by government and by us as independents. So finally, on my last page. So my last poser will be, now that we have accepted, and even the Minister of Finance has said so, and in any case, anybody can plot the graph, and it will become clear that oil and gas revenues, so go to like, yes, oil and gas revenues will no longer fund our budget. If oil and gas revenues in the foreseeable future will be accounting for anywhere from 20 to 30% of total budget, it means that oil and gas revenues are no longer the anchor of our national budget. Fact. So what are the policies or policy readjustments that will focus on non-oil revenues? And how do you focus on non-oil revenues? Non-oil revenues means that the rest of the economy must be expanded to optimize the tax revenues that will come from the rest of the economy. And it's easy. There was a presentation at the CPI lecture the other day by this very well-known lawyer, Gbenga Oyebode. And Gbenga Oyebode said in 2000, telecom's contribution to our national economy was zero. It was zero, 490,000 lines. Contribution was zero. Today, 189 million lines, the contribution of the telecom sector to our national economy is 10%. It's the same contribution as oil and gas was when we were at our peak. Now, why am I using this as an example? Government withdrew from telecoms after how many years of monopoly? And the private sector has grown it from a zero contribution to the economy to a 10% contribution. Hopefully, in the next 10 years, our refining sector will not just be producing products for us and for export. The real gainful employment and all the multiplier effects of that downstream sector will more than quadruple what the contribution of our refining sector was to this economy. And it is the same thing everywhere. If we produce and utilize gas the way I had described earlier, it will mean that our agricultural sector will boom. We'll have fertilizers, we'll have mechanized agriculture, and its contribution to the economy will also quadruple. It also means that all of this gold that criminals just pick up in Zamfara and arm people to kill others so that while they pick up the gold for export and make the money, not a single kobo of that gold mining gets into the national economy or gets into the federal budget. All of that will have to change. So it means that gas as an enabler for domestic energy security and as a catalyst for industrial growth must be emphasized so that all the multiplier effects of distributing gas to all who need it, whether it's heavy industries, whether it's fertilizer, what is electricity, each of those sectors will then create multiplier effects in the economy. And the taxation, company income tax and payee from those expanded sectors, those are the things that will fund our budget. And that's how budgets everywhere in the world are funded, except that because we found oil, we started running a rental economy where you just collect the rent from oil and use it to fund the economy. So we're returning to a traditional economy where taxation, and to maximize your taxation, the economy must expand. So midstream industries we make up for import substitution, so that hopefully all of the petroleum products required across West Africa will be produced here in Nigeria. All of the gas required across West Africa will be produced here between Nigeria and Ghana and distributed to the rest of West Africa. And then we'll start taking agriculture and mining seriously because there will be fresh revenues, including forex, coming from those areas. So, but again, are we in our planning? We keep talking about 5-year rolling plan. We only talk about those things. I don't think things happening to show that these simple things I've outlined, all the things I've discussed in the past 35 minutes, there's none that is novel. There's none that is difficult to understand. But they are all things that require a set of people to sit down and say, these things are reality. These are the plans. So that we don't see a government, either a government regulator or an NNPC that is struggling to compete with the private sector, rather than opening up the private sector so that these other sectors can expand and proper tax revenues will then roll in to fund our budgets. Because that is where we're going. We are no longer going to get rental revenue from oil and gas to fund our budgets. If we don't expand the economy, there will be no jobs, there will be no tax revenue to fund that. It will be catastrophe. A combination of lack of jobs and see all the borrowing now, everybody, including even up to El-Rufai, is now complaining that we're past our limits. When our debt to GDP ratio was 2%, we were jubilating. We're heading towards 40% debt to GDP ratio. We've seen it in countries who borrowed and destroyed the future of their children. Greece nearly collapsed. Where we are today, if what we're describing now doesn't happen over the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, our children will all emigrate from here because there will be nothing here. The same way people are walking by foot to leave Venezuela is how Nigerians will be leaving Nigeria if we don't do these things. Fortunately, all the ingredients for an expanded economy and an economy that can substitute for oil and gas revenues with all other sources of revenue, all the ingredients are here. Both the human resources, the natural resources, the educated workforce, we're all here. So I'm saying our industry transition is inevitable. It's also predictable, which is why we're discussing it now. We can, and we should plan for it. But are we planning for it? So that's a discussion we'll have with all of you over the next 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Avuru. Yes, I think we've all had Dr. Austin Avuru. Austin, well, I am not surprised. I'm not surprised that you've given this level of what I call a treatise on what we should be doing. But I'm sure we'll give you another hour. We will continue. So it's also therefore nice to limit you. I have been asked by the program to give a summary of what you have said in 5 minutes. Before I give that summary, there are things we need to do as a country if we are supposed to be where we should be in the next 20 years, outside planning for the petroleum industry. Because the petroleum industry is only one aspect of our national concern and productivity. Now, we are talking about energy transition. Where is the Energy Commission in this country? We have an Energy Commission. They've been there for years. What have they done for the country? Besides NNPC. Now, you find that to do what you are saying, Austin, we need centers of excellence. You can't just be doing what we are doing now, because people have to see into the future. Unless you have that, the human capital, we cannot do with what we have now, because people are telling us that the quality of the products that are coming from our universities are not the required quality of persons and competent people. And besides that, I am sure that before any job you have as a person, you require a leadership that has vision and passion in nation building and leadership. And we also require people who also will understand what is required. Not that we just talk and then, as if we are talking to a forest. We have talked and talked over the years, but my question is, are we capable of listening as leaders? Or is our leadership capable of listening to what we are telling them about some of these things? We thank God that it was leadership that listened in 1985 that led to the windfall profits in 1990. We were the only one in the whole world that did that because we went to leadership and they listened. Now, Nigeria as the flagship of the black nations and Africa, we need to show ourselves that people will come and be seeking and want to come here. We need to sell our country also, so that we will not just be looked at as if we are an entity to the whole world. Now, in your submission, you said that investors are no longer funding oil projects for good reasons, because oil is a big pollutant, and they rather go into gas. So by 2050, we have exited gas. And then you talked about renewables. That it will happen. It's already happening. It's a matter of time. You also mentioned the fact that there's little exploration and exploration. There's little exploration at the moment. Only just appraisal work and production drilling. You mentioned the issue of how many billion barrels of oil was discovered in the decade of 1990 to 2000, and the 20 years after another 8 billion possibly, and that injection of capex to maintain production will be required in the future because people are not enthusiastic about investing in their business anymore. And it will be a difficulty to find people or convince lenders to give you money as independents because, like you mentioned, the IOCs or multinational oil companies have large reserves, and they have to borrow for some of the things that others borrow from. So now, where are we heading towards? We're heading towards renewables, and most of the oil companies want to step down their carbon footprints, as Niger Delta is already a mature basin. We also talked about the abandonment costs that will be required, which we may have to be looking at for now because they will be expensive and costly. In some cases, millions and possibly billions of dollars. You mentioned the cost of crude production cost being between $3 to $3.5 per barrel in the 80s up to the 90s, and that now it is between 15 to 18 dollars per barrel. So we are in a regime of our operating costs, whilst, for instance, the price of crude has plummeted. You also mentioned the fact that royalties is the main take of government now, and appropriate is just merely for mention. You also mentioned the fact that prices of crude will remain very low for a long, long time, and that we cannot afford to be having high cost per barrel if the operating cost, if the price of crude will remain very low or depressed for a long time. Now, how do we plan to manage the energy transition from oil to gas to renewables, and probably solar and enough? Who are going to produce and distribute this energy all over Nigeria and all over West Africa? Who is going to ensure domestic energy security? Is it not our Nigerian independence? Now, we will also require human capital for energy transition. We must realize that because right now, I don't know what the rate of replacement of people in the industry is. Because if we don't start replacing those who are in the industry now at a very high rate, where we are going to have a crisis of competent and trained people in the future. We also mentioned the issue of refining for West Africa and Nigeria in general, and also link that to commercial basis, to gas for agricultural and petrochemical activities. Now, we're talking of who are the independents who replace the IOCs? And the problem is that, which independence anyway? Now, the question is, has NNPC the quality of staff to run their operations and to also help the Nigerian independence? Is anybody thinking of what crisis we might be in NNPC and industry if we don't do this? It was a particular policy in time that produced people like Avuru and George Osahon and their likes. It was a definite policy that produced them. It didn't just happen. And I think those in authority need to realize that we have to do that once again. And we also need to find out and encourage the present independents to be able to grow, if need be, by giving them some encouragement, either by way of tax breaks or whatever, so they can grow. Well, Austin, you finished by saying that The houses are preparing for the exit. At the moment for the exit, there will be a void. That void needs to be filled. And if that void needs to be filled, we must have already in place, if not already in place, prepare for the next set of competent people to run our industry because of the impact of oil on the nation's economy. The final question was, as oil revenues dwindle, where would our economic policy be? And we should focus on the following: non-oil revenue, gas as an enabler for downstream and domestic energy, midstream industry for impact substitution, and finally, for the mining industry that have been permitting us of what I call indulgent activities. It is not a matter of, it's not accidental that the minerals industry is not properly regulated. It was deliberate to an extent because those who benefited knew those who were benefiting knew they were benefiting, and they had links to other people, probably were in the shallow chambers of power. And with that comment, I think I have made an effort, maybe not a very good one, to summarize what Austin has said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Session Chair. Thank you, our special guest speaker. Clearly has been a highly enlightening speech or talk. A lot of things that have been shared are things, like you said, that are not new, but the way you have put it together has clearly hit home. So I'll just dive straight into the questions we have. We have a question from Professor Babs Oyeni. First, he says, thank you for a wonderful presentation. You have highlighted the oncoming challenges. What are your suggestions on solutions going forward? That's from Prof. You want to take that? Okay, I will mute you. You're muted right now, sir.
Yeah, I think we can take all of them, or as many as possible at a go then.
Okay, so next is Mr. Akpan, actually Dr. Ekere Akpan is also one of our coordinators for one of the chapters for FNAPE, one of our esteemed ESCO members. He says the transition to gas is necessary, but are the current policies on gas favorable enough to encourage a drive for this transition? It goes further to ask whether the price for gas is, okay, I think he has rescinded that. But what he's talking about is the price for gas and the loans around gas, everything is in dollars, whereas in country, we saw gas in Naira, so it doesn't make it favorable for people to invest. Next is Afolabi, and he says, totally agree that Nigeria and Africa need to ensure that there is a clear focus on domestic energy independence, on fully utilizing the fossil fuel value chain. Can you kindly speak on what government needs to do to revive the refineries and petrochemical plants? How do we get enough funding to support the midstream and downstream projects? To the one we call NAPI number 1, Chief Akomeno Otari just says excellent presentation and great work. All right, I think we should take a little break and then have the next one as next set.
Okay. Thank you. For solutions, Prof, I thought I did my best, really, because I first, even though I put them up as posers, but that's where I attempted to say all the things we need to do. So in response to the energy transition, I said gas and solar will be our solution. That will be the direction we should go. And that funding has to now, we start looking internal because you're not going to get the funding coming from outside. So our industry needs to turn its focus on domestic energy security. So I provided the solutions, even for what government should do. I said it's clear now from what we have discussed so far that we can't look up to oil and gas anymore to fund our budgets, and therefore the whole intent will be to expand the economy. And so let me take that solution and also address what Sheyi tried to ask, because he said, what should government do to revive the industries? I think that's exactly the point I'm making. And that's why I give the example of telecoms. If we left NITEL to keep telling Nigeria that they will supply us electricity, the contribution of telecoms to the economy would still have remained zero. But in 20 years from 2001 to now, of letting the private sector run it, billions of dollars have flowed into that sector. We have 189 million lines. It now contributes 20% to our economy, 10% of economy. If these refineries we keep talking about, the first time I wrote an article, I remember it's in the book I published 10 years ago. The first time I wrote an article asking for the privatization of refineries was in 1992. 1992, which means the issue of a refinery is not new. It's not new. The first time we started having scarcity and it became an issue and consumed the position of a very powerful minister was Professor Aminu. Professor Aminu was minister in 1992. So the problem of our refineries is not today. It means that for 28 years we have been talking about turnaround, the refineries haven't worked. That's exactly the same way NITEL would have been. The truth is, if you look at any sector that government gracefully withdrew from and restricted itself to proper regulation and policies to drive that sector, each of those sectors have grown. Once upon a time, we had only 3 banks. Every 3 years, government will announce, distribute the chairmanship of the 3 banks, one for First Bank, one for Union Bank, one for UBA in terms of geographical distribution. That's how it would have been today. Those banks could not fund the $10 million project at that time. They withdrew, and look at the banking sector. It's not perfect, but look at the size of the banking sector today. If we had withdrawn from refining 20 years ago, we won't be here now still talking about what should government do to revive them. They shouldn't revive anything, they should withdraw. They should withdraw. Right now, after waiting for 20 years and they refuse to withdraw, those who have the courage and access to funds are now building their own. Once they all start producing, you won't see those refineries. They won't be worth the land on which they are. So my real message, which is why I said I'm combining the question of what are the solutions to look. Government should now consciously start withdrawing completely from economic activities and replace their role with strong, and I mean strong regulation to make sure that jokers are not in any sector of industry, of any industry, and that people play to the rules and everybody gets his due, including government getting his tax. So it's not about what should government do to revive this. Government should plan a clear and total withdrawal and come up with policies that will ensure that the private sector thrives in these areas. Gas policies, they're nearly good enough. Again, government is reluctant to withdraw from fixing prices. The PIB is attempting to put some structure around fixing prices. But I think we're already at a point of willing buyer, willing seller. Regulation should be the kind of regulation that makes sure there's no profiteering by maybe one person having a monopoly in a certain sector. You're the only one producing gas there, and you tell people there can only be $6 to $6 per thousand instead of $3. That kind of policy can regulate that. On a large scale, you should be willing buyer, willing seller. We're already there. Now, in the question of gas, gas is a commodity like oil. It is priced in dollars. How out in Nigeria, they pay you in naira. I don't see anything particularly wrong with that. I mean, after all, MTN and all the telecoms companies, you're not paying your telephone tariff in dollars. These are all foreign companies that came here with dollars to invest. You pay them in naira, they're still able to repatriate a good chunk of it. I agree that it is difficult. It would have been much easier for you if they pay you in dollars like crude oil, but yeah, it's used domestically here. We're not exporting it, so don't expect payment in dollars, even though the pricing will be in dollars. It's up to how you manage the business properly in such a way that you can get the dollars you need to maintain your facilities and expand and convert some of the naira you're earning if you're in the gas business either through central bank or whichever means into dollars to run your business. I think those are the ones we've taken so far. We can take a few more very quickly, Latif.
Okay, sir. So, Mr. Collins Ibekwe, I believe from Myanmar, he says the federal government has just announced a plan to resume oil exploration in the Lake Chad Basin. They plan to invest a large amount of capex in exploration activities and drilling. Should this be the direction we should be heading now as a country, considering the obviously inevitable global energy transition you've just talked about? Should we not be looking at investing in the more forward-looking energy projects or even other viable projects in general? Next is Mr. Bayo Adebi. Thank you for enlightening the group. As you have indicated, nothing is new in your speech. Our leaders, I presume, are fully aware of current and future trajectories of the industry. A lot of us are reminding the government. We are now at the stage where action by the Nigerian government is needed. Inaction will not stop the tsunami. So that's just a comment. Apologies for that. The next is, how is the PIB, when passed into law, going to support gas business opportunities when government has positioned for the right title to gas resources, especially for PSC assets? Collins comes again, Mr. Ibekwe, subsidizing domestic consumption in oil and gas and the electricity industries has been the Achilles heel of this industry. Is this not the right time to make the bold decision and end these subsidies rather than haphazard way we are currently managing subsidy removal? Mr. Malik Taiwo Adebayo. Good afternoon, sir. Nice to listen to you, to delivering the lecture. My question is that gemstones are not given priority in this country, even though blessings of the nation is immeasurable too. So I figure he's talking about the lack of prioritization to solid minerals, which includes gemstones and other minerals that we are blessed in the country. Chinotu George, it's just a comment. This is obviously revealing are the government and other stakeholders directly sensitized on this as to invoke action. That's a comment. And I will end with Mr. Akimade, Mr. Femi Akimade, also another former president of FNAPE. He says you are right. We have the vision and ideas on what to do, how to get them done. How can we now get organized, draft the policies, do the follow-up and achieve our goals? So he's saying that you highlighted the challenges, you've come up with some ideas, but how do we turn those to policies and implement them? So I'll stop there before we take the next set of questions.
Okay, thank you. The exploration in the chat, I will, I'm not sure what additional value it will add to this discussion to comment on whether or not we should be exploring the chat. It's not new. We've drilled over 30 wells in the chat. So I won't comment on exploration activities in the chat. Does the PIB support, and I think there's another question that is down the line by Chief Sena Anthony that is also asking the same question about whether PIB supports gas opportunities. I think so. As a matter of fact, I'm very hopeful on the draft PIB. Chief Sena, maybe when I see you, you tell me your views because that's your area. But I've read the draft twice, and I think it does it makes a lot of effort to support gas development. In fact, a lot of the gray areas that were impeding gas development, including PSC gas, the PIB tries to clarify it in such a way that those impediments are removed. The PIB also tries to promote midstream development, which you will no longer get the benefits or the tax benefits from your upstream oil. For instance, the PIB now, if you build a gas plant, for instance, the condensate yield out of that gas plant, even if you spike it into crude oil, it will be treated as midstream condensate and taxed as such. That's what the PIB says. Whereas now it's always a gray area. Once you spike your condensate into crude, it has to be treated as crude and taxed at PBT. So overall, I would say that the PIB, this version that I read, subject to a few things that we tinker with here and there, I think this version is very, very supportive of some of the growth we're looking for, not just in gas development, but in the oil industry, as a whole. Yeah, subsidizing electricity and gas and so on. Again, we've been talking about this for 20 years. But you subsidize when you have excess money, even in your home. You don't subsidize when you do not earn anything when you're in your home. Fortunately, our spate of borrowing has reached a point where those who are borrowing from are now telling us they won't give us the money unless we take away subsidies. So that's why we're now having the courage to start addressing. And you can see we're crawling towards it. We're still doing it so reluctantly to arrive at market-related tariff for electricity and removing the subsidy on oil. We're doing it thankfully, even though we're just being forced to do it by those who are borrowing from. But it is now happening. Why are gemstones not given the priority that they deserve? I'll tell you this. I know that when Mrs. Obieze-Kwesili was, it's a short period, I think she was Minister of Mines and Power, mines they call it, whatever it is, solid minerals. And she tried to do what the oil industry did before 1969, which means, completely recreate all the mineral zones into blocks where people can bid for the way we do in oil and gas. You are given a license and therefore your activities are monitored. You see what you are mining, you sell it, you pay your royalty and taxes to government, pay your workers and take your profit. Until we get to that point where the solid minerals industry is properly structured and regulated, where you don't just go and mine for gold. You can't come and drill a well in my block today. It's taken for granted. Nobody will do it. Not even the people who live in that community can drill a well for oil. So if you properly delineate these into blocks, into mining leases and whatever you call it, I think there was a cadastre that she set up under the Nigerian Geological Society, produced that cadastre. And the next thing would have been to be carrying out international competitive bids for these solid mineral blocks. And then people who have the expertise and the capital to inject into it would have been here mining Congo and a number of countries around the world depend on solid minerals for their livelihood. So I don't see why we can't organize ours and people will apply for competitively, get those blocks, mine, you monitor what they're doing, they pay their taxes and royalties, government gets their due, and the mining company gets its due. Why we have removed it, the only person who did a very good job of it. The reason I know is she set up a committee. I was a member of it at that time. That's obvious. But since she left that office, I don't know what our solid minerals ministers have been doing. I understand that when you get there, some of the biggest jobs there is to give waivers for people who are importing barytes and bentonites and so on and so forth. That's probably the only job that most people who are solid minerals ministers, that's what they concentrate on, rather than the real planning job that is required to turn solid minerals into revenue earning industry for government. So it's not a big deal. It can be done. Why we haven't done it, I do not know. So let's take the last set of questions.
Okay, so we have a tsunami of questions. I'll fly through them. Precious Umuku, before the year 2000, many IOCs in their visioning correctly saw an energy mix with 50% alternatives. About then, Nigeria had its Vision 2010, a well-articulated petroleum sector vision which included increased structure and increased local participation, had no ownership. Should a body like FNAPE review that vision and own it? Chief Senna Anthony, congratulations, Austin, on your excellent and thought-provoking presentation. Congratulations, Chief Tunde, on your 70th birthday. Do the physicals in the current proposed PIB support investment in gas offshore development, midstream? And if not, what are you doing about it? I think you've kind of touched on that. Professor Joseph Ejadawe, high cost is a critical element of one of these issues you've raised. I believe this is one area a conscious effort can be made to moderate technical costs per barrel. Could you elaborate on some of the elements that contribute to high cost and possible solutions? Leke Ogulewe. If the gas potential is desirable for future transition, and utilization is largely for internal economic consumption, while the capacity of the local banks to fund their growth is limited, what can be done to incentivize international financiers to provide the needed capital? One of the ESCO members, the chairman for the Investor Assistance Program, Dr. Emmanuel Maduaye, he says, thank you for the great scholarly presentation. What's your thoughts on Nigerian youth takeover of the industry? A look at the current independents, their senior management are on the average of late 50s. 10 years from now, they are all old. Well, they are old already. What is the hope for Nigerian youths in this void being created by the IOCs? Wow, Mr. Titi Ario, good afternoon, sir. Thanks for the brilliant discussion. What do you perceive as the main challenge that might face solar energy in Nigeria? Madam Pat Marcelli, thank you very much for your excellent presentations. The issues raised are pertinent and should be addressed for the long-term sustainability of the country, Nigerian industry. How do we ensure that recommendations and highlights from these deliberations are reflected in policies? And she goes further to suggest that NAPE should address in a strategic manner and increase its advocacy and engagement with government agencies. Dr. Maduaye has another question, which I'm going to skip so that we can give other people. Okay, Mr. Gulaga, what would be your advice for students and young professionals thriving in the oil and gas industry? Mr. Ojo, Jide Akindele, it is certainly there will be a move from big oil to renewables. Shell and BP have made their commitments, but who will take responsibilities for the gap? Funding, seen as the banks did not do well in the oil days. Wow, we still have a ton of other questions. I do not think we can take all of them. That's that many. So let's just, we even have Dr. Fatu. Wow, I think we have to take another set of questions, sir, if you don't mind. Let's have this one, then the next last one. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Our guy, Mr. Muku, talked about, I think there was supposed to be a second part of his question, but I didn't see it. But it's about what the point is saying is there was a properly thought out policy document on this whole energy transition and the exit of the IOCs. It's just that nobody took ownership. And so again, it comes to the question somebody was asking, how will these recommendations, how can they be taken to government? Can NAPE play a role? So I think there is a general suggestion, not a question anymore, that NAPE should take one step forward, take these issues that were discussed. We've done it before. We talked about marginal field. We held a workshop on marginal field and listed all the available marginal fields and suggested what should be done and took it to government. Eventually, the marginal field program started. We've done a few things. So maybe these transition issues we're speaking about, NAPE should go a step further, probably hold a very strong workshop where clear action points are taken to government from NAPE to say, we think these things must be done. As somebody said, if they are not done, the tsunami will be inevitable. So I think, yeah, there's a clear role there for NAPE to go beyond what we're just doing now to actually taking action, document it, take ownership, and push it with government and ensure that things are done properly. That's what Mr. Muku and somebody else was suggesting. The main challenge facing solar energy, there really is none. Today, if you look at everything between solar and the battery and everything, is probably slightly more expensive to deliver solar to homes than generation by gas turbines. However, globally, those costs are coming down. There are companies in Nigeria that are investing a lot of money, and there's a lot of money coming from outside the country into solar. It is building up. Companies that are serious-minded are already looking in that direction. I'm talking about some independents that are in oil and gas business are already looking into transiting into solar. So there are really no big challenges. It's going to happen. It's the same companies that have made it happen. I mean, smaller companies who have seen opportunities in oil and gas are also going to seize the opportunities in solar and make it happen. Now, incentivize foreign banks. You don't incentivize foreign banks to give you money. They will give you money when they see the opportunity, and that opportunity fits in with their policies. If they are now implementing a policy of not funding fossil fuels, I don't know that you can get them to change that. What I said, my solution is you now have to look inwards. Look at our own banks and look at your own internal cash flow to make up for the loans that are no longer going to get from foreign banks. High cost, the high cost solution. See, yeah, everybody talks about it, but you are right. We need to put in concerted effort because that's the elephant in the room. Right now in Nigeria, the high costs, they come from 2 or 3 main elements. Number one is the insecurity or perceived insecurity in the Niger Delta. It takes a large chunk of the cost we're seeing today. I always use very simple examples. I mean, when Mr. Ife was our guy in NAPIMS and Mr. Adams was GMD of NMPC, Mr. Adams was going to worry. He will land by aero contractors and 1504 will pick him up with his driver. He's only here in Lagos. You will see him sitting at the back of his 505 Evolution those days, and his TA sitting in front. Today, if the MD of an independent, as MD of Seplat, if I'm going to worry, chances are that I will even go in a private jet. And then I land there, a whole retinue of 5 policemen in front, 5 policemen behind, will take me through the fields. So if you look at the average cost of Mr. Adams' trip to Warri there versus the cost of Mr. Afolabi going to Port Harcourt or going to Warri tomorrow, today that Mr. Afolabi's trip will cost about 100 times what Mr. Adams' trip used to cost. You can spread that across everything. Somebody is being paid a lot of money to guide pipelines, pipeline security contracts. Somebody is being paid a lot of money to make sure that, and all kinds of things. And all of these then have the multiplier effect on our OPEX. So if the issues, and unfortunately we left all the issues on Niger Delta unattended. What I mean the issues, their own expectations. The expectations of the Niger Delta would have cost us only about 5% of what we're now spending on security if we handle them well. The example I always use is if you allow somebody to steal your Rolex, your $10,000 Rolex wristwatch and go and sell it in Oshodi, he will sell it for 10,000 naira in Oshodi. Neither him nor the people buying know the value. But if you had given the man 20,000 naira to go and buy food, he would not have stolen your Rolex to go and sell for 10,000 naira. So we have also misbehaved in the Niger Delta that we're paying dearly for it now. Because all we're paying for security is simply intolerable. And I don't know how we can wind that clock back. We still have to address the issues of the Niger Delta are not difficult to address. I'm telling you, that'll be a discussion for another day. But if we address those issues, the expectations are quite minimal. If we address those issues and save only 30% of what we're spending now on so-called security in Niger Delta, it will go a long way. That's one element. The second element is all our contracting cycle and all the contracting cycle. When you are dealing with a 3-year contracting cycle, every contractor will pad it for all the uncertainties and so on. So if we also address that, it will reduce the cost. So the things to address to reduce costs are very fundamental. It's not just about threatening operators. It's not just about saying if you don't reduce your cost to $10, X, Y, Z will happen. It's just like when we spent 30 years telling people if you don't stop flaring, we'll do X, Y, Z. It didn't happen. But as soon as it was possible for operators to monetize their gas and earn money, all of them have been reducing flaring without you having to threaten them. So both government and the operators have to really sit down and honestly come up with a blueprint for addressing the Niger Delta question in such a way that we no longer have to spend so much money on security that is actually about 60% of this extra cost. That would be, like I said, it's be a major discussion of its own, but those costs have to come down, otherwise we won't go anywhere. I don't know what to say about Nigerian youths. This industry is not about youth or old. You have to be competent to get the job done. So we have to find, nobody goes to look for old men to hire. We look for youths to hire. In CEPLAT, we have a pipeline of young people we train. We have the graduate training. We do every other year. We hire about 30 very brilliant kids. It's not really true that products of our Nigerian universities are not useful. You just need a little more training. The ones we hired, we have done 3 sets now. About 100 of our staff in CEPLAT are through that program, graduate training program. And they're the future of the company. You can see that they're brilliant, they're kids, you train them and they respond very well. They're the future of the company. So just the same way as multinationals were doing that, the independents of today have to do the same thing. You can't set up a company and just go and hire only experienced people who are 50 and above to run it. No. At some point, you must create that pipeline of young graduates, 22 to 25, hire them, brilliant ones, train them, and over time, they will be the ones to take over. And then eventually, they will be the ones to become, as I asked the question, where are the lies and Tundes? They'll become the ones that will be the lies and Tundes 30 years from now. Yeah, I think that's it. Should just take another quick one and then I can shut up.
Thank you, sir. So this is the last set of questions. Mr. George Chinotu wants to ask, would you advise E&P companies to merge for marginal fields? Mr. Eze Henry from Enugu wants to find out whether you would promote the same suggestions you are pushing around the oil and gas industry for other sectors of the economy. Mr. Charles Ojo, I believe the independents have the technical capacity to take over from the multinationals. What they lack is the financing, because for local banks are reluctant to invest in the oil and gas sector. What are your thoughts on this? That's from Mr. Ojo. Then Dr. Oluwatoyin Fatonas is asking, do you think that this is really the unplanned transition of Nigerian oil and gas? 1 second. All right, sorry, it seemed like we were going to get an additional participant. All right, so Dr. Oluwatoyin Fatonos asking the unplanned transition of Nigerian oil and gas, or really the unplanned sequestration from oil and gas in Nigeria. In as much as we all now are aware that we have been quite unplanned for the transition of the industry, what do we now have in the plan? What are the strategies we are taking in the short, medium, and long term? What plan, for example, adding on new carbon sequestration technologies and check to reduce carbon footprint do we have in Nigeria? What new renewables and systems, e.g. solar, wind, are being considered and putting the capex towards a long-term modern energy platform and energy security for Nigeria? What are the policies we have in place or are drawing up to shape, advance, and give momentum to the transition? What data information tools do we have to guide our plans? How committed are we towards self-sponsorship and investing in our modern energy and growth in order to have a leap into the industrial growth at par with young countries? So she has another question, but it's pretty long. We're going to have to excuse that. Then Mr. Nwobodo Ikechukwu, he says, do we have the people to take over and move the country forward, addressing the issues at hand? Okay, these are just all comments about a very nice presentation. Okay, Mr. Mike Azukwo, how about leveraging on modular refineries to increase our refinery capacity and stop dependence on imported refined products? Wouldn't this help boost our capacity? Mr. Livinus Kibo, what is your take on frontier exploration in Nigeria, given the trend of moving towards renewable? The Industrial Panel on Climate Change have ways to reduce or cut anthropogenic gas emissions from fossil fuels. Will that not be a motivation for oil-producing countries to continue exploring and exploiting the resource? And just to add to that, there are certain technologies that allows you to convert your standard crude oil to things like greener diesel and cleaner energy. What are your thoughts on that? Mrs. Afolabi Noye Niyi says, thank you. Oh, it's just a greeting. It wasn't a question. Abina Tinu, thank you. We have always been concerned about the quality of graduates from our universities and long-term succession. Considering the global energy transition upon us, what is the quickest way of changing this narrative? Shola Uyilola is just sending greetings to Dr. Chief Tunde Afolabi. Joseph Cookie, please, what are your thoughts on the Niger Delta development with regards to reducing insecurity in that region? Okay, so the last set of questions will be from KC Ikwako. Great presentation, Austin, for presenting this doomsday scenario for the Nigerian oil and gas industry and the implications for the future of Nigerian people. To start with, we need a functional energy policy. We have one paper, but it is worthless. FNAPE should devote another webinar on that topic. Can you comment on this? And his follow-up question is, focus on domestic energy security will require money. Where is the money coming from, especially with IOCs pulling away and CapEx dwindling in fossil fuel? Do you indigenous independents have plans for sourcing required money? And that's all for now.
Okay. It looks like there's a particular question Dr. Lalude will want to answer. Do you want to allow him to do that?
Yes. I was thinking I'll let him jump on that once you take a stab on all those questions. Okay.
Let me quickly run through. Let Dr. Fatono's question and the other questions about carbon footprint, sequestration, and if you notice, I mean, that's a completely different discussion. That is, how do we go head towards zero carbon footprint? But I've taken the discussion away from that core. That is the core discussion that is going on in the advanced world. Remember that let's also, because all of these climate change discussions, always situate them within what is best for your economy. You know, sub-Saharan African contribution to the carbon problem is only 3%. It's actually only 3%. It's insignificant. So for us, and this is what I've said in so many other places, our contribution to the reduction of carbon footprint is not so much in all the huge technologies, carbon capture, carbon sequestration. Yeah, we can do some of those. Even just planting trees, it can probably capture more carbon than some of those very expensive technologies. However, I am saying that between substituting diesel generation for electricity with gas, just substitute diesel generation for electricity with gas. Substitute LPFO and HPFO in heavy industries with gas. So gas for us is not a problem as they see it in some other parts of the world. Gas is part of our solution to minimizing carbon footprint. The next solution to add to it is solar, because we have it in abundance. So I'm saying that if we deliberately, as a region, put a lot of emphasis on maximizing gas production to substitute for heavy fuels. You know, coal, for instance, if there's any way we use it, LPFO, HPFO, and diesel, we substitute all those with gas, plus even tree planting, and then capture as much solar as possible. I think at that point, we would have made all the contribution we can as a region, as a country, towards minimizing carbon footprint, which is why, and those are the issues that Dr. Tunde was trying to raise, which is why I won't go through the very complex issues about, carbon sequestration, zero carbon footprint. It's about how do we still run an economy that creates jobs and at the same time minimize our carbon footprint. And I'm saying our solution lies in gas and solar. Modular refinery as solution, the point I'm making is not about whether it is modular, it is huge. Government is withdrawing from refining, or at least government hasn't done anything about refining in the past 20 years. The private sector is coming in now. We are hearing that maybe by Q4 next year, we'll be seeing petroleum products from Dangote. We're already seeing from Walter Smith. I think they're already test producing, even though it's a small one. So I don't worry about refining anymore, because it's obvious in the next 5 years, our refining capacity will be double what our domestic consumption is. Again, that is because the private sector is moving in and not because government did anything to improve on the refineries that already exist. Nigerian graduates and quality, I try to say that. Look, we have 1 million kids admitted into our universities also every year. It's a large number. Let's not chew our nails about how poor the quality of education is. We are doing our best within the limited resources to bring up these kids. If we expand this economy and employ these kids, we have the capacity to then retrain them and they will be useful. We're not going outside this country to look for young graduates to run our economy. It is these same graduates from these universities we are going to hire and retrain and use them. They are not, let me tell you, any kid with 5 credits including English and mathematics and is admitted to university is not a dull kid. When you retrain him, you will see what I'm talking about. We've seen it. I said it earlier. What we're doing in Seplat, and we're seeing the results. Would I promote the same thing and promote oil and gas for other sectors? Yes, the message is clear. We need to have a consistent and well thought out withdrawal of government from economic activities, replaced with strong regulation that makes sure that those who have the capacity to produce move into those sectors that government is withdrawing from. It's not just oil and gas, every sector. Measures and marginal fields, well, to tell you the truth, again, every time I'm talking about strong policy, because of our ego and the way we are, we own things. We are very possessive. You want to own your house, whether you need it or even if you need money, you won't sell it to go and do something else. You must leave it for your children. We want to own our car, and so on. So we're very possessive by nature. Unless policy forces us to, people, because of ego, hardly merge. Otherwise, there's so much room for mergers, even as we speak, among independents, among marginal field companies, but you see it happen. It happened in banks because policy forced them to. Once policy said you must capitalize to this amount, all of them started merging. So maybe again, between the DPR and tax authorities, if they come up with the right policies, you will see mergers. It's not otherwise. If you just think somebody will come and say, "Oh, come and merge with my company," and I'm no longer the chairman of the company, not in Nigeria, it's unlikely to happen. So again, it is policy that we force measures, not just measures for the sake of it, but measures to then create even bigger and more effective companies. Well, somebody is saying financing is the only problem for independence. Otherwise, they can do everything multinationals are doing. I leave it to the jury to judge that. I do not agree, but I won't bother. I won't bother disagreeing openly. I don't agree that financing. As a matter of fact, the companies that know what they're doing, financing is not their problem. It's the other way around. The companies that know what they're doing, they have financing for all their projects. That's the only thing I would say. About that. Niger Delta already gave a hint. I say it's a discussion for another day. All I'm saying is, if we really, really honestly address the needs of the Niger Delta, they are not expensive. They are not expensive. We handled it before. Ask Ademi Barrow of First EMP. The IPPG will lead a group to the vice president and presented a paper on how he will handle the Niger Delta after the last closure. And thanks, nobody will know this, thanks to the things we asked him to do, and he did. That's why since 2017, we haven't had any crisis in the Niger Delta. Something as little as Niger Delta invested that required only 3 billion naira capital injection. It was so small what they were asking for. And once we met those requirements, we haven't seen any crisis. Those of you operating small fields in Niger Delta, you will know that if you are honest, the requirements to maintain peace in that place, the requirements are not much. The requirements are less than 5% of what it costs us to keep peace by force. That's all I would say about the Niger Delta issues. I'll take back to you.
So at this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Lalude. Are you there, sir?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. Okay, could you take the final question?
All right, I'm not taking a question. I said I wanted to make just a couple of comments.
Okay, please go ahead, sir.
If you allow me. Number one, Tunde, congratulations on your birthday. Wishing you long life and continuing productivity. I want to take a departure from this discussion. Over many, many decades, I've come to one conclusion, that the details of what we need to do are not the problem. We spent a lot of time today talking about how to solve problems. We know how to solve problems. The militating factor are the processes and the governance issues that stop progress from taking place. Austin, you mentioned earlier on telecoms. A lot of people don't know how the telecoms change took place. I was involved in it and I know. During President Obasanjo's regime, the issue came up as to whether to stay with the old analog system or to move digital. There was a fierce discussion and also competition. Some of us got together in the Academy of Engineering. We decided we were going to really move the issue. And we wormed our way to the very top and made private presentation to the man on top to show why changes needed to take place and what will benefit those of them who are politicians if they did the right thing. At the end of the day, we succeeded in getting President Obasanjo to say, well, he will take it on. And you see, if you follow what happened then, he forced his way through. The opposition was stiff, but he agreed with us. He saw the points we made to him and ordered that it should be done. This week, I don't know how many of you have seen the publication. This week, Nigeria was ranked one of the top 5 nations in the entire world in growth of telecoms. You know what percentage we had? 69,000% change, to buttress what Austin was talking about. 69,000% change by a simple action of doing the right thing. Government didn't have to solve the problem. Private sector solved the problem. But the policy switch is what counts. So what I'm saying is this: we as professionals lack one thing, speaking with one voice. Every organization is trying to do its own thing. We're splintered all over the place, and we don't have momentum. We don't have the clout to change anything. Every year they talk about economic change. Who are the prominent people talking? Lawyers and accountants. You don't see the real productive sector moving as one unit to get things done. We need to change that attitude. We need to start talking about FNAPE, Society of Engineers, SPE, and all of them speaking with one voice and forcing their way to the top to seek changes. Otherwise, we'll be still talking another 20 years from now and nothing much will happen. Because the charlatans that are able to get it to the top will influence policy. And we will still be complaining. Then the other thing, which I should really mention here, is that there's a lot more to this whole issue of transition we're talking about. We haven't even talked about all the support services that go along with finding and producing oil and gas.
Dr. Lolude, could you please put on your video, sir?
Oh, sorry. You see, there's a wide range of professional competence that goes into moving the nation forward. And this is only one element of it we're talking about. If you look at expenditure all around the world, exploration and production constitutes a much smaller percentage than the overall capacity for industrial growth. And we need to mobilize on a wider scale by forming an umbrella of the different groups coming together as professionals and presenting a position with one voice to change things so that all the services we need can be brought in. Once you change policies properly, the professionals can get the work done. This is the key issue. I can go through so many different things that I've taken part over the last 50 years. And I tell you, I'm not happy. I'm not happy not because I haven't done anything. We've done a lot. I can give you one example. 1975, we got oil companies to get together to build a nationwide gas pipeline. And it was agreed to. I took part in the study. We wrote the report, presented it. And the only reason why we didn't have a national pipeline was because the policymakers were not well influenced. And today we're still talking of nationwide pipelines. You're talking of gas utilization. You can't use gas properly if you don't have national pipeline system anyway. So I just want to make those few comments that we try and see how best for us to influence policies so that the professionals can get on with their work and do it well. I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that Nigerian professionals in any of the technical fields can perform if the circumstances are right and the policies are right and the top is influenced properly to give them the go-ahead to do what they need to do. And the nation will be better off for it because it will be more cost-effective. I like to stop there. I just want to change the direction of thought so that we can think a bit more out of the box and see how best we can achieve our goals.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Lalude, Dr. Femi Lalude from, I think, from the US and Florida, I guess. It will be my honor to call on the President FNAPE before we change into the next portion of the conversation. I appreciate the special guest speaker and our session chair. While I'm getting him up, please, it would be good to also note just not a response or a comment to what Dr. Launde has stated, is FNAPE has actually put together a think tank. And the think tank is not just made up of people from FNAPE, it's across the industry, SP, NMGS, just professionals with track records and reputations that transcend the industry and other industries in the country. And the aim of that think tank literally is to continue to advocate and pursue solutions that have been discussed so far. Mr. Alex Tucker, are you there, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay. And just an appreciation to our special guest speaker and to our session chair. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, distinguished fellows of FNAPE. Good afternoon, participants.
We can hear you, my friend.
Yeah, I want to sincerely, on behalf of the executive committee of FNAPE and the organizers of this event, thank and express my appreciation to my Oga and mentor, the chairman of today's event, one of the people that have mentored us to be where we are today, Mr. Mavoye James Orife, FNAPE. So we appreciate your acceptance to chair this memorable event of today. We're very grateful. As part of your tight schedule and so many other engagements, we don't take any of this for granted. Our distinguished fellow, another past president, so anytime you are safe to speak, a lot of crowd gathers to listen. We're very proud of you, especially those of us from the NNPC. You seem to understand it all, coming from the national or a company well-groomed. We're very proud of the way you handle issues of the nation, your love for FNAPE, the oil and gas industry, your dear nation. We thank you immensely for accepting to speak at this very special topic for today, the unplanned transition of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. It is actually unplanned, and we have to face it. We appreciate the time you've taken to put this together. We're going to go through it and see how we can move it forward as an association well respected by government. Thank you very much, sir. I will speak more when I'm giving my closing remarks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Austin Avuru. We will now move to the next section of this event, which is Tributes Hour, Chief Dr. Tunde Afolabi. I'll start by asking Mr. Baya Akikbelu, fellow of FNAPE, past president of FNAPE also, to kickstart the tributes. Over to you, sir. Okay, we can now see you, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. To the birthday boy, you know, most of you who remember the first governor of Nigeria, he said that 70 is the young old age. It is not old age, as many people think. And you don't become old until you are in your 80s. So welcome to the group of young old age people. I will come back to talk a little bit more about Tunde because we've been friends for quite a while. Let me briefly visit Austin Avuru, who is now firmly established as the oracle of the industry, not just the profession, not just the. He's become the guru and oracle of our existence these days. And you did not disappoint on this occasion either. And I enjoyed every bit of your presentation and gladly agree with most of your points. You know, the only little addition I have is that it is actually the economy as a whole that is in transition or should be in transition, not just the oil sector. Again, if we handle the economy holistically, all sectors will follow suit. But I'm not a lecturer and I'm not going to spend time doing that. I also want to thank my Egbon Jimurife. As a matter of fact, I realized that I have so many Egbons in this event, from Mr. Rio to Jimurife to Bolalude to, but it is a very, very powerful testimony, not just to the need of this discussion, but the person of Tunde Afolabi. I met Tunde Afolabi in 1983 in New Orleans, far away from Nigeria. And I can't even remember what particular event brought us together, but since then we have become inseparable. And through all the years, we tend to find each other out, irrespective of wherever we may be. Tunde is one of the three musketeers, as we call ourselves. The three musketeers, the other musketeer is sitting down there somewhere with his wife. The new DSC awardee of the University of Ibadan, Wala Fatono. So the three of us, in those days, in the 80s particularly, called ourselves the Three Musketeers. And believe me, we worked seriously and very hard to achieve some of the state of our nation's oil industry today. And of course, some of them went the way of private participation in the form of marginal field operatorship, whereas some of us went back to the source of the opportunities, presumably to keep working more on what opportunities and how acceptable these opportunities are to the powers that be within the companies. So today you are a true leader of this industry in all respect. And you've been there for so many people also, just like Austin alluded to company policy in Seplat of developing the Nigerians. I would believe that you also did your own part in developing this industry of ours. I wish you a happy day, a very enjoyable day, and I'm sure you will have many more opportunities of celebrating you and your achievement and your family, not only in the oil industry, but all over the path of life as we crisscross it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bayatipalu. Thank you for your tribute. Next, we'll be calling on Dr. Dr. Lambert to pass his tribute. Dr. Lambert, are you there with us, sir? Okay. While Dr. Lambert is loading his video.
Sorry, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Atrusco, welcome to the club of the jobless. I don't know what Bayo was talking about, young old age, but very soon you are going to be sitting down like us, just reminiscing on what you have done. Today, I congratulate you, and particularly your wife too, for leading you and supporting you up to this level. May the Lord continue to keep you and bless you. I think my video is on. It keeps going off. All right. I want to thank you for the role you have played in this industry. And I also particularly want to thank you for accepting my proposal back then when I came to you asking you to be president of FNAPE. I am glad I did not make a mistake then. See where we are now. A lot of people don't know about your benevolence because you are so quiet about it. Today, the Lord will continue to reward you and to bless and guide you in what you are doing in his vineyard. It is amazing that not a lot of people go unnoticed. They do their things not wanting favors or gains, but the Lord remarks it. Enjoy your 70th birthday and many, many more years. The girls surrounding you will continue to give you pleasure. You and Shei will enjoy yourself to ripe old age. God bless you, sir. Continue to know what you do best, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
I won't speak.
We can hear you and we can see you, sir. You can go ahead and speak, sir.
You want me to speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, for me, this is a very easy job because I want to talk about my very dear younger brother, as I should say. For those of you who know, Tunde and I are from the same town, and our neighborhoods are not far apart. And I'm pretty proud of him in every respect. Tunde has a lot of quality, which a lot of people might not even be aware of. He's a dedicated person, not only to his profession, but to family, to origin, the nation as a whole. Every single thing that I've known him do, he has always done par excellence. You know, to make sacrifices in a very difficult circumstance is never easy. And Nigeria is one of those places where circumstances are never easy to perform. There are too many PhDs around trying to pull people down. And I'm sure he has had a lot of share of such people over the years. I've had plenty of discussions with him on many issues, not just oil and gas, social issues, religious issues, name them. And I know that he's a very steadfast person. One important thing which he has as a quality, when he makes a promise, he keeps his promise. And you know, this is one of the qualities that's missing more and more in our society today. Integrity and policy and promises are very key to the stability of any nation or any entity. And for the young people who are listening, they must learn that it's not what you get out of something that matters, but what you contribute and effectively change the lives of other people. Today, you have done a lot for many people. You've done a lot for many institutions, a number of which people are not aware of. But I know you're not looking for any praise. You're not looking for any gratification from that point of view. Please keep doing what you've been doing. I know, if I'm to judge from myself, that you still have many more years to go to contribute to the society that brought you up and to which you have been very faithful. 70, in fact, is the beginning of your life. I will expect you to start slowing down maybe in about 20 years from now.
Oh.
Until you reach that point, really, please don't let the word retirement even cross your mind. You can disengage from certain activities, but you re-engage in other things. My interpretation of retirement is the process of putting on new tires in order to keep going. So you are retiring so as to get going. And your contributions in the next 2 decades are even going to be more critical than they've been to date, because the country is undergoing very difficult circumstances. We need to reorientate a lot of our young people, and all of us gathered here today must now really set ourselves to become very strong mentors of the younger generation. And finally, let me say, Nigerians have to appreciate one thing. It is not age that makes a difference. I can say that many of my own subordinates and staff over the years, although I've been much older, have found it difficult to cope with the pace that I take. So it's not age, it is competence, as Austin himself said earlier on. What we need to move the nation forward is a combination of all ages, all competencies, but the watchword is excellence. And once we start doing that, we will have absolutely no problem. So, Sheyi, I also add you in the congratulations. Thank you for managing this man well. And may you never get tired of managing him. Good luck, good health, and long life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Femi Lalude. Much appreciated, sir. All right, so I'm going to call on our session chair. Even though you're not a chief, we'll keep on calling you chief until you accept the chieftaincy of NAPE. Mr. Mabuaye James, popularly known as Oga Jim Orife. Over to you, sir.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, thank you, Ablatif. Where do I start?
Start anywhere.
I think, Chief Afolabi, I won't say he's an enigma, but I think he is the Chinese man in Nigeria. He bargains and makes sure that when he's driving a bargain with you, he does it very well. If you go and negotiate with him, be sure you are on your toes. Because if you are not, you will wish you never negotiated with him. And you won't find anything wrong with what he has said. It's just that you probably didn't do your own homework. And because you didn't do your own homework, that cannot be placed at his doorstep. That is what life is. It is what you negotiate that you get. And I think that is one of the secrets of his being able to grow Amni to where it is today. Chief Afolabi, I know you're a very humble man. Unless somebody actually knows you in public at conferences, they won't know who you are. Because you are self-effacing, and it's only those who know you that know who you really are. I would like to ask you to continue as you have done over the years, so that the blessings of what you have sown, you will reap them in ripe old age. The Yoruba say, I don't know, I'm not very, they say, Wa'adagba, Wa'adarubo. I think, I don't know what it is, that's what it's Wa'ato. I don't know what it's about. You will go through all those stages until, Dr. Lalude said, you will be in ripe good old age. And when your days here are completing, you will not have anything to regret over. You have seen your children's children, and you have benefited all that you needed to have benefited from. And at the end of the day, your son was going home with, to God be the glory. Afolabi, we thank God for your life. And my prayer for you today is that may you live a life worth emulating as you have done over the years. I may also plead with you that if you can find the time and the resources that you use today, this event, to try and see what can be done to grow competence in the industry, and also for planning the transition, because this transition is being discussed on your 70th birthday. So when you are 80, and we are here, but if we are here, those who are here will have to do what they have to do. But when you are 80, I would like you to sort of reflect on how far we have gone in the 10 years since you were 70. I like to thank your MD, your managing director, and your dear wife, also known as my dear, for the way she has helped and kept you in your industry. Because, you know, it is, no matter how confident you are as a man, if your home front is in tatters, there isn't much you can do. It will show anyway in everything you do. So I want to thank your wife for playing her role in your life. And both of you, as they say in Yoruba. I don't know what the other ones are. This is what I hear in here and there. You you do all that you need to do so that you will live together in happiness and in good health all the days of your life. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray for you. Amen. I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Chief Mabwaye James Orife.
Mr.
Mr. You know, in medical field, after you pass professorship, you now become a Mr. So, okay, Mr. Sir. All right, now I'm going to invite Dr. Lai Fatono to give his tribute.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I'm not sure whether you are hearing me, but let us assume that I'm not just talking to space. Latif, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. We can hear you in the physical and in the other realms, sir. Good,
thank you. Well, Tunde, congratulations, and so much has been said about tributes to you. So I'm not going to spend useful time making any tribute, because all the elders have said so many things that needed to be said about you. The joy is today we are celebrating you, and we want to thank Sheyi for all the very nice panel beating that she has done on you. I mean, yesterday you said she's the sugar in your coffee and the milk or cream in your tea. And that's the reason why you have diabetes. And everybody just laughed. But Sheyi, thank you so much. And Tunde, you're a very blessed man. And Bayo had given away a lot of things about what he said about the three of us, himself, yourself, and I, because a lot of people don't know the story that Amni today just upped the game. The story of Idama Field, which was to have been your first exploit in Nigeria, is a book. It's a chapter in my own book, which is coming very, very soon. But when we were planning today's event, we were a little bit confused as to how it should look. And we decided that it would be two celebrations in one. So we are celebrating your 70th birthday and we are honoring you, but we are also celebrating Austin Avuru. And we are celebrating him and honoring him. And that's why Austin was chosen to make the presentation today at your event. So both of you, one way or the other, are complimenting yourselves and ourselves, our industry, our business, our society. The glamorous thing about both of you is the footprints that you have left, or that you have shown that it's possible in a country and an industry that is chaotic as ours. Austin, let me first of all say thank you for whom you have been, for what you have done, for what I think you really, really have just started to do, because you're going to do more interesting things now that you are the principal at AA Holdings. And if people don't know what AA Holdings is, Austin Avuru Holdings is the new business enterprise that Austin is going to transform into another seplat, which I know will happen quicker, cheaper, and safer than the journey to along which seplat had gone through. So our celebration is to both of you. Austin, you are asking who are those who will replace the Lais and Tundes and Demolas. I am asking who is going to replace the Austin of our industry, because you've done very exceptional things that have not been considered to be otherwise possible in an environment like this. Taking an exit from NNPC, maturing Platform Energy, transforming that and going on to start seplat and getting seplat to where it is. God has blessed you. And I come back to Tunde. God has blessed Tunde as well. And this God that has blessed both of you, I am asking that God to bless more Nigerians along the line that both of you had been perfected. And I just pray that God hears our prayers in this country more than we can imagine. And I just want to say to both of you, Tunde in particular, I want to say thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a brother. And thank you for being an associate in the very difficult journey that the Nigerian oil and gas industry had been through. And to Austin, I also want to thank you along the same line that I've thanked today. I just want you to recognize that for both of you, and you being younger than today, the journey is hardly ever starting. You talked about transition, and you painted a very, very worrisome situation for us to understand. And I just believe that talking about these problems is just part of the beginning of the solution. And once again, to you, Austin, and to Tunde, congratulations for the achievements of both of you. And I would, on this note, say, have a very, very blessed weekend. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you, Dr. Pastor Lai Fatono, for your remarks and prayers for the celebrants and the country, and I guess myself inclusive. Thank you for those prayers, sir. I'm going to ask on Chief Dr. Tunde Afolabi to respond to all the well wishes. I think there's a need to just read a couple of additional tributes. Dr. Babangida Ushishi says he worked for you in AMNI 1997 to 2005. Thanks you for your mentorship and how you supported his career in the industry and his acquisition of master's and PhD degrees at Manchester University. He wishes you the very best. Baya Debi says, congratulations, have a great birthday. Sheya Afolabi, oh, that's Madam. Sends our greeting. Dr. Fatono, Dr. Toyin Fatono sends our greetings also. Ogbebe Charles sends his greetings, says happy 70th birthday and wishes you the very best. And then the accolades are still coming in. Over to you, Chief Dr. Tunde Afolabi.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've unmuted myself and I've put myself on video. I'm hoping that you're hearing me.
We can see you, we can hear you loud and clear.
So let me just, somebody has said a long time ago that my biggest problem is that I can never keep my mouth shut. today actually is not a day that I should be making comments about, the paper that Austin gave. But Austin, you forgot where I met you first. I met you in Benin when you were at MPDC. And it was actually you also and what's his name that were together in the same office. So that was when the three musketeers, as it were chasing, I think, Oredo Field at that time. Anyway. So the comment I wanted to make is also something to more or less a light path to your to your presentation. And I listened to you, and I started college or university in 1969 in the US, and in 1970 I went to my first AAPG conference. And Dr. Habuti, I'm not sure whether the man is still alive or not, was one of the speakers at the conference. My takeaway from his talk was that in 1900, oil was given 50 years to be depleted. Okay. But when he gave his paper in 1970, which was 70 years later, we had discovered new reserves for another 50 years, right? Which meant that by 2020, we'll have depleted all the oil reserves. Well, today, global oil reserves stands at 1.73 trillion, T, not B, trillion barrels. And at today's consumption rates, I think we are consuming about 36 billion barrels of oil per annum. Meaning, for all intents and purposes, if coronavirus doesn't kill all of us and we don't discover any more oil, we have 50 more years of crude oil. So the point I'm making here is that you geologists and geoscientists and engineers who had, Austin just now, don't go and change your major. There is still plenty of oil to find. And what he also said that makes me very happy is that gas has a carbon footprint that is completely out of whack, with oil. And I can tell you that in the not too distant future, gas will be more expensive than crude oil. They will switch places. So the idea now is for us to find more gas than oil, so that hopefully, when we deplete the oil in 50 years, we will have something else that we can, charge our electric batteries or electric cars on. So that is my 1 cent worth. So what I'm really supposed to do is to let you know how overwhelmed I am by the love shown to me today by an association that I've taken very keen interest in, and I feel a kinship to. Let me just digress a little bit. There's one of you guys there, his nickname is Road Runner. Since I met him about 30-something years ago, maybe he has gained about 2 or 3 ounces, and I don't know whether I should blame his wife for that, okay? He wears the same size 36 or 34-inch waist. He wears the same 36 suit, life after all. So that is the Road Runner. He has not gained 1 ounce. So I call him, you remember that commercial? No, it's not commercial, that cartoon, Beep Beep, Road Runner. So he can't sit still. So he called me and he said, "Today we want to do a talk for you." I said, you can't sit still. Why don't you just find something more constructive to do? He said, "No, I'm serious. We're going to try and do something for you." I said, "Oh, fine. Just let me know where and when and what you want me to do." All right. And lo and behold, we've been here now for almost 3 hours, not just talking, but making constructive contribution to the future of this country. And I really do feel the love, the kinship that you guys have shown me today. It is not every day that you turn 70 And it is not every achievement that you attain in life that is recognized and appreciated. I feel honored that this prophet is acceptable in his own country. I thank the president of NAPE, Mr. Alex Taka, the president-elect, my dear sister, Mrs. Patricia Ochobu, our chairman of today, my brother, Mr. Jim Orife, we call him Jim, the publicity secretary, Mr. Abdulatif Amudu, today's guest speaker, Mr. Avuru, and I'll come back to him in a little bit. And again, the brain behind this webinar today is Dr. quote-unquote, Road Owner Faye Fatono. I'm most grateful to all of you. Those who are not 70 yet, you will attain it in good health and with success. And those who have attained the age of 70, you will be 80, 90, 100 plus. You will suspend us at that time. In Jesus' mighty name. So Austin is just about, I think, 8 years younger than I am. And I've always looked at Austin as our next generation. But the generation that, when your next generation is turning, you wonder what the hell is going on, okay? So I'm glad to hear about AA holding. So let's talk, okay? Because in your case, life doesn't start at 60. You are actually just been born, all right? I virtually took over my company when I was 64 years old, okay? And God is going to give you the wherewithal to be able to build something bigger than where you just left, in Jesus' mighty name. So to all of you, my brothers and sisters, growing the next generation is one of the things I'm going to spend the next 10 years of my life trying to do. The energy transition strategy for the next generation. And I want NAPE to put this into one of their, maybe the 2021 NAPE conference, energy transition strategy for the next generation. And I hope if we can put it for 2021, we can probably find some times during the one of these midstream conferences that we have. It is very, very important. This has to be a plan. We have to have a blueprint to get it done. We can talk about it, but if we don't have people that would actively take charge of it and make it happen, it's not going to happen. And by God's grace, it shall happen. Once again, I thank my wife very much for working behind, the scene to see that this thing takes place. She has always been the rock behind me. She's always been forefront in everything that I do. And like somebody said, I think it's Jim, that yes, she has played a very pivotal role in my life. So being here today is God's grace and His our help. So I thank all of you. God bless you all. And I guess I don't have to say that Johnny Masses to your home, because all of you are next door to your bedrooms. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very, very much. Our honoree for the day, Chief Dr. Tunde Afolabi. And your remarks are well appreciated. Before I call on the president to respond, because once the president talks, his presidential prerogative is that he shuts the program down also. So I'm going to stand on existing protocols and quickly fly through some very key and critical information and announcements. So the very first one that we have is our conference. The 2020 NAPE conference is going to be a virtual conference. We've said this multiple times, and I'll give everybody a guess who's sponsoring our opening ceremony. It is also the honoree for today. The opening ceremony is going to be sponsored by AMNI, and we are pretty grateful and appreciate that. The conference is going to be filled with a lot of information, technical programs, special events, which includes our opening ceremony, pre-conference workshop, management session, and awards night. There will be a lot of thought-provoking conversations, and there will be very insightful technical conversations also. We will also have a virtual exhibition. There are still a couple of spaces left in our virtual exhibition. So please log on to our website, www.nape.org.ng.com, and please join us. It's a virtual conference. Registration is ongoing. All the information is on our website. A run-off to that is the short courses just before the conference starts. We will have short courses on Saturday, and they'll be running for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. They're very, very insightful. And that's what I have for now. I'm going to hand it over back to the president, who you can see right now, to give his closing remarks and significant comments. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you very much, our able Public Secretary, Lateef Amodu. We're very proud of you and your team for being there since the lockdown. I want to start by, first and foremost, once again, on behalf of the entire executive committee of FNAPE and membership, to appreciate the initiator of this program, our own distinguished Dr. Lai Fatona, FNAPE past president, BOT member, SC member, so many things to NAPE. I want to first and foremost appreciate everyone, the doyen of the industry, my mentor, one of the founders of NAPE, Mr. Mavue James Orife, once again the speaker for today's event, our own distinguished fellow and past president, who has stepped in to speak. I want to specially move today, distinguished chief we're honoring today, our own Chief Dr. Tunde Afolabi, MFR, FNAPE, past president, Chairman AMNI, worldwide. Sir, we are very proud of you. In the midst of challenges, NAPE could not afford to use that not to celebrate you and Austin Avuru today. With a very short notice for this program, you won't believe that looking at many platforms we have put together to overcome the challenges of COVID lockdown, we have about close to 300 participants worldwide participating in this event, because once you have guests from the US and Europe, we can just cover the rest. If we were to put this together physically, it's likely we may not have some of our foreign special guests listening to this. We appreciate your contributions to NAPE. I was amazed that right from last year, you could go ahead and sponsor opening ceremony that you were not even sure was going to hold. That was the level of trust you could have in NAPE and the leadership. We were surprised that you could do that this year at the 45th anniversary. When I got in touch with you, it was like, how do we manage the time difference between Houston and Lagos? Just after a little discussion, you had to make the sacrifice on behalf of NAPE to get up that early, together with your dear wife, to attend a program of about 4 hours. We went beyond 4 hours, and you were there to deliver a keynote address, 45th anniversary of NAPE. We don't take any of these contributions and sacrifices for granted. Sir, late hours of the night, we can call upon you when we have challenges. I've had cause to just send a text message about 11 p.m. to find out the best time it could be to just call you. And to my surprise, a few minutes after that, you called me back and we discussed for almost 30 minutes. It's not common. We appreciate every sacrifice you made. It is our prayer that God will keep you and keep your family. I'm glad as a sitting president to have been a part of your anniversary, getting into the emeritus cadre of FNAPE fellows. In June this year, with Kunle Odushina, you are the second for this year. We're celebrating. We thank God for your lives and your contributions to FNAPE. And I want to quickly add that all hope is not lost, because FNAPE is in a position and well positioned to achieve some of the things and to help to overcome some of the challenges mentioned today. On February 15th, under my leadership, we were able to inaugurate a 30-member FNAPE think tank committee made up of the best. All of you mentioned here are members of FNAPE think tank committee. With such a committee, the hope behind it is that there's nothing FNAPE think tank committee can take to government that will not receive approval. Looking at the caliber of personalities, it's made up of SPE members, it's made up of NMGS, it's made up of the likes of PETAN and groups who were thinking ahead how to speak with one voice, instead of every group taking different topics to Abuja. To this year and the years ahead will be the best for FNAPE. DPR director said it during his webinar lecture that if FNAPE was a bird, it would have classified FNAPE under the eagle, ability to weather the storm. FNAPE is the only professional body in 2020 that have not deemed it necessary to cancel any program in the midst of challenges. There's no challenge we cannot overcome. DPR said there's no DPR without FNAPE. As far as the director is concerned, FNAPE is DPR, DPR is FNAPE. There's nothing we need DPR to help us out as a professional body that will not get it. Another very important personality, the sitting GMD of NNPC, a distinguished fellow of this association, my chief executive, is a fellow of FNAPE. His passion for FNAPE is much. By Monday next week, he's hosting us in the midst of so many things. We are going to be mentioning some of the things we have discussed today when we meet with him on Monday in the afternoon. We are going to be hosted. So we have DPR on our side, we have NNPC on our side, and the most recent senior special assistant to Mr. President is one of us, Dr. Habib Nuhu, just from DPR. So we have that lineup from DPR to NNPC to the presidency. There's no better time to talk of transition. And I'm going to put this energy transition strategy, I'm going to put this in my handover note to the incoming president. That will be, I want to promise, that will be one of the first workshops FNAPE will take in the new year. Concerning who and who will succeed us, and those that are already 70 and above, FNAPE since April during the lockdown, I've been organizing lectures for over 50 universities virtually and engaging the lecturers up to vice chancellors virtually. We have impacted the university community, and currently we're in partnership with PTDF, willing to work together with FNAPE to touch the lives right from the campuses before graduation. We are going to be sending visiting geoscience lecturers across the 6 geographical zones in partnership with PTDF. On Wednesday this week, I led the executive of FNAPE to a delegation to TEFONT TEFON has accepted to also work with NAPE in grooming some of the younger graduates that we are wondering how they will be able to take up the challenges. This week, we're with TEFON. So with TEFON and PTDF agreeing to partner with NAPE, I think there's still hope for a greater NAPE and the oil and gas industry. With this arrangement, we'll be able to put together young graduates that will be vibrant, who will not necessarily even be willing to work, but will be ready to run when they get out of your service. We're putting up programs to overcome some of the challenges mentioned today with very key parastatals of government that are well funded. So, sir, we want to wish you a happy birthday, long life and prosperity, in good health. You look very healthy. You are very godly, and God will strengthen you. We will live to celebrate your 80th anniversary. We will live to celebrate your 90th anniversary, and many more years as God will grant you. Your impact on humanity, your service to God will not allow you to live a short life and your family. This is our prayer from NAPE for you and the family today. Same for our own Austin Avuru. We look forward to when you graduate into the Emeritus Club a few years' time. We'll be here to celebrate you once again. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Executive Committee of NAPE and the entire membership, we're proud of both of you. We continue to celebrate you. We continue to tap from your wonderful experiences, and the industry will move forward. Everything we have set up to achieve, we should be able to achieve as we progress in the new year and continue our interactions with government. We will not give up. We will not relent until we get the industry where it's supposed to be. And together, I believe we can make it. Thank you once again. Happy birthday, long life and prosperity in good health. Thank you, sir. God bless. Have a blessed day and a memorable weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we sign out, it will be good for the everybody to know a lot of well wishes are coming in. We can't read them all. We will not plan to, but it will be good for the celebrant to know the president-elect has sent our tributes, the General Secretary, Mr. Ebi Pinnick, MD Masharami, Mrs. Jumeka Ajayi, Professor Babs Oyenei, Mr. Charity Akpan, and the celebrant's wife, Mrs. Sheyi Afolabi, has sent on behalf of the Afolabi family, appreciates everybody for the kind gesture. Again, standing on the protocol sent by the president, we are now ending the event. Thank you, everybody. As we sign out, please feel free to stop this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, PS. We appreciate you.
Have a good day, everybody. And
thank you. We appreciate our secretarial staff as well, all participants.